Yemen's recovering president looks set for an extended stay in Saudi Arabia, while his supporters say he's still making decisions that affect his country. Unfair advantage. A special election court in Afghanistan moves to fire 25% of the nation's lawmakers after finding evidence of widespread voting fraud. Helping hand. EU leaders gather in Brussels to hammer out a deal that would save Greece from a disastrous debt default. And Southeast China braces for Typhoon Milei as local authorities call ships back to harbour. Ni hao, thanks for your company. I'm Edwin Ma in Beijing with this 30-minute update of CCTV News. In our top story, Libya's foreign ministry is demanding the UN Security Council send a team to investigate NATO's June 20th bombing at the house of a close associate of Muammar Gaddafi. Letters have gone to UN Chief Ban Ki-moon as well as the UN Human Rights Committee, calling the NATO airstrikes collective assassination. The bombs hit a large family compound of former Interior Minister Kuwelidi Al-Hamidi in Surman, 80 kilometres west of Tripoli. At least 15 people were killed, including 3 children. International judges say they'll rule next week on whether to order the arrest of Muammar Gaddafi. A judicial panel of the International Criminal Court will announce on Monday whether it's to issue arrest warrants for Gaddafi and his son Saif al-Islam, as well as intelligence chief Abdullah al-Samusi. Prosecutor Luis Moreno Ocampo alleges Gaddafi's forces attacked civilians in their homes, shot at demonstrators, shelled funeral processions and deployed snipers to kill people. An arrest warrant would turn Gaddafi into an internationally wanted war crime suspect, liable to be detained if he ever ventured outside Libya. Yemen's President Ali Abdullah Saleh doesn't appear likely to return home anytime soon. He's currently in Saudi Arabia, where he's recovering from serious injuries suffered in an attack on his palace earlier this month. Meanwhile, international efforts to solve the country's political crisis are still going on, but there's no sign that an immediate breakthrough could happen. Yang Wei-han explains.
A Western diplomat said on Thursday that the embattled president is not returning home anytime soon. He said an initial investigation showed Saleh was seriously injured in the explosion from a TNT charge planted inside a mosque within the presidential palace in Sana'a on June the 3rd. But an aide to Saleh said on Thursday that his health was on the mend and that he had been receiving guests and giving instructions on day-to-day affairs in Yemen.
The health of the president is reassuring. He is now establishing contact and communicates with the administrative apparatus of the government in a systematic manner. He issues directives, blesses decisions, and reads about events taking place inside the country.
As Jeffrey Feldman, the U.S. Assistant Secretary for Near Eastern Affairs, was in Sana'a to meet senior Yemeni officials, the Yemeni government rejected the idea of talks about the transition of power in the absence of the leader. Ahmed al-Sufi described the visit as being of no value.
The only legitimate person within the political spectrum is President Ali Abdullah Saleh, and the Americans do not advise us to pursue any transfer of power outside the Yemeni constitution and outside the political legitimacy of democratic systems.
Leaders of the European Union are arriving now for the second day of their summit in Brussels. They're going to try to convince Greece and financial markets that they have a workable plan to help Athens avoid a debt default. These are the pictures now coming live from the venue where this meeting is to take place. On Thursday, Eurozone leaders called for decisions to be made in early June on a second bailout package for debt-ridden Greece, pressuring the Greek Parliament to adopt a new round of austerity measures in return for fresh financial support. The €110 billion bailout Greece accepted last year from the EU and the IMF has proved insufficient, and the second package worth 120 billion euros is now under discussion. The Eurozone countries are also negotiating with European banks as well as insurance companies a voluntary rollover of Greek debts. Greece has a sovereign debt pile of 340 billion euros, more than 30,000 euros per person in a population of just 11.3 million. Leaders of all 27 EU member states have urged the Greek government to continue implementing with resolve the necessary adjustment efforts to put the country on a sustainable path. They add that a new austerity and reform package by the Greek Parliament would be the precondition of the second bailout. Also on the agenda is the bloc's immigration rules, but that discussion seems unlikely to generate much progress. The migration topic has been catching heat since early this spring, when a sudden influx of North African migrants put Europe's prized Schengen free travel zone under great pressure. So we've just seen the arrival of the leaders to the discussions and deliberations that are about to take place. Well, earlier EU leaders met in Brussels to discuss how to avoid Greece getting into a situation of bankruptcy. And we can just update you with some of the background information that Greece needs fresh funds by the middle of July, which it hopes will come in the form of a renewed EU IMF bailout package. The 110 billion euro bailout Greece accepted last year from the European Union and the International Monetary Fund has indeed proved quite insufficient. And a second package worth 120 billion euros is now under discussion. The Eurozone countries are also negotiating, as we mentioned earlier, with European banks as well as insurance companies, a voluntary rollover of the Greek debts. So this is the situation, which is certainly causing great consternation, and we'll keep you up to date as that progress of the meeting in Brussels continues. Meanwhile, the Greek Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister, Evangelos Venizelos, has announced a revised four-year set of austerity and reform measures. And the announcement comes on the heels of the tough negotiations with representatives from the EU and the International Monetary Fund in Athens. James Kim has more details.
On Thursday, Venizelos was in discussions with the country's international creditors over critical austerity measures that must be passed by Parliament next week. European partners and IMF officials requested the painful spending cuts and tax hikes amounting to 28 billion euros until 2016, as well as the acceleration of a 15 billion euro privatization program. Venizelos said he's still in discussions with officials from the European Commission, International Monetary Fund and European Central Bank over 5.5 billion euros worth of savings that are part of the 28 billion euro program. The Greek minister has reiterated that the prime target at the moment is to restore the country's image.
Our basic goal, as we have said, is to restore our credibility, to be able to create the conditions for a more effective negotiation on the issues that concern us, and concerning always how to deal with our physical problems based on ensuring sustainability and long-term sustainability of the state debt.
Venizelos also outlined new taxes in the austerity measures, including a small tax hike on heating fuel and lowering the tax-free bracket for incomes to 8,000 euros per year from 12,000 euros. Those aged below 30 and above 65 would be exempt from the tax on annual incomes between 8,000 to 12,000 euros. Venizelos added that the threshold for tax on real estate will be reduced to ownerships of value of over 200,000 euros from the current 400,000 euros, while there will be also a reduction of up to 400 million euros in 2011 on state expenditures. A vote in Parliament is scheduled for June 28th. The two umbrella unions for private and civil sector employees called on Thursday for a 48-hour nationwide strike next week. Public electricity company employees are continuing their strike, which started Monday, causing power cuts across Greece. James Kim, CCTV.
France's Finance Minister Christine Lagarde has made her case to become the new leader of the International Monetary Fund. On Thursday, she outlined her vision for the institution's future in a meeting with the IMF's executive board. In separate one-on-one meetings with its members, Lagarde said she believes the international lender should be more responsive, effective and legitimate. The IMF's executive board said it planned to meet next Tuesday and is expected to choose between Lagarde and Mexico's central bank chief Agustin Carstens to head the IMF by the end of June. The International Energy Agency has announced that its 28 member states will release 16 million barrels of oil from government-held reserves onto international markets. It's the third time the agency has mobilized its strategic oil reserves since its establishment almost 40 years ago. The move will immediately increase global supplies by nearly 2.5%. The decision was prompted by worries that falling production due to the crisis in North Africa and a seasonal demand surge would push crude prices even higher. The move shocked traders who had been expecting the IEA to give up top exporter Saudi Arabia more time to make up for the supply shortfall following OPEC's failed meeting on June the 8th, when members blocked Gulf efforts to increase output. And responding to public demand, the Egyptian interim government has announced its first budget for 2011-2012. There's increased spending with a focus on social programs and human development. More details from our correspondent in Cairo, Sharif El-Touni.
One of the main triggers of the Egyptian revolution in January 25th was the weakened economy, inflation and unemployment rates. Today, and despite political and economic reforms that was implemented after the conflict that ousted former President Hosni Mubarak, the economic situation is on the downtrend.
Local instability is seen in the street, however improving ever since it has started. But yet, the economic situation is still unstable because we cannot expect neither public sector, nor private sector, nor even foreign investors to come to the market and start large business or even small before seeing this stability.
Egypt's GDP saw negative growth of 4.2% in the first quarter of 2011, according to official data. The tourism sector was most affected by Egypt's revolution, down 33% on the fourth quarter. And according to analysts, the released figures were better than expected. Private investment declined 16.3%, although still on the positive side. Public investment declined too, reaching $4.7 billion, down from $7 billion.
The economic crisis we are living in now is short-lived. I can assure you that if we go back to work and let tourism resume, exports resume, it will not take me more than a year, this coming year we are talking about of this budget, to go back to normal and even exceed the 3 to 4% rate of growth of GDP.
To meet growing demands from the people, Egypt's cabinet has approved the budget for fiscal 2011-2012, boosting spending in social programs. The budget totals $83 billion, reflecting a spending increase of 14.7% over the current fiscal year. A statement released by the cabinet said the deficit was expected to drop to 8.6% of GDP compared to 9.5% for the current fiscal year.
Well, although it is an acceptable budget, however, it could be better. I think we had to increase more the level of taxes, whether people like it or not.
The budget reflects an attempt by the military council that replaced Mubarak to prop up the weaker sectors of society, meeting the main demands of the revolutionaries. One of the main principles adopted by the government in the new budget is to invest extensively in the social services, with millions of Egyptians deprived of necessities for decades. But as much as it brings good, it affects the already damaged economy. Sharif El-Touni, CCTV,
Cairo.
And you're watching CCTV News. We'll have more stories for you right after this short break. An information official of Yemen's General People's Congress, Abdul Hafiz, has said that President Saleh's health is good, but his return depends on medical advice.